So I'm Leslie Johnson. I am Nebraska Extension manure educator, as Catherine indicated. And so my role is to teach manure management across the state of Nebraska. And I'm going to start with a little bit of context about that because that definitely sets up how and why we use the program that we do. So in to give you that context, in Nebraska, our livestock operations, those that have those waste control facility permits, so our NPDES permits and our state permits, are required to have land application training every 5 years. And this land application training includes lots of things, as you can see on your screen. But we also offer a recertification option that's a little bit shorter for those folks that do this because they have to do it every 5 years. We try to keep it a little bit fresh and not having to go over the basics because some of our livestock producers have actually been through this now 2, 3, 4 times since this was first started. And you can see from our list, we have lots of things that we cover. Majority of it utilizes this interactive mapping experience. In some cases where there's asterisks, we have either a different activity or we use the traditional PowerPoint or we use videos. So we spend from about 9 o'clock in the morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's almost all around this mapping exercise. So this mapping exercise, and you sort of saw a preview of it in the intro slide, or in that very first slide of mine. It was pilot tested by not only our Nebraska manure team, but also we had Chrissy Smatterman, who is my counterpart in Minnesota, came down and we pilot tested this in 2020. We developed it throughout 2019. It's actually something that happened because of discussions that happened at Waste to Worth in 2019. So again, another plug for Waste to Worth. I encourage you to come because all kinds of great things come out of that meeting. And so we started with a pilot test in 2020. Because of COVID, disaster struck. We ended up doing, we were going to have an in-person educator in service to teach how we were going to teach this, and ended up, because of COVID, moving to a virtual training. I don't encourage that in any way. This definitely is much better for an in-person training than it is insert through Google Slides or however you're doing your interactiveness of a webinar. But it is something that can be done. Minnesota did it for a little while and decided to go away from it because most of their trainings are virtual trainings. So in fall of 2021, we had discovered this was very successful with our manure team and teaching livestock producers, that we decided we were going to adapt it for nitrogen management trainings, which is something that our natural resource districts require because we have such high nitrates groundwater levels in the state in certain areas. And so some areas are requiring these nutrient management trainings for crop producers. And so we've adapted the exercise to include some nutrient management outside of manure as well. So we have a few different activities for that. After we had done that, we realized, hey, we can do the basics. This was initially designed for those recertification people that have been through the training before. It was not so much offered for that initial training, that we still stuck with the basics the same way we had always taught them prior to this. And after we had been so successful with the nutrient management, or the nitrogen management ones, we decided we were going to expand some of the manure basics and do some of those that same interactive style. And that's really where we're at today, is utilizing the mapping exercise for our entire training program and spending all 7 hours on this mapping exercise, or nearly all of it. So there are a few things that are coming down the pike, but they're not quite here yet. I'm working on trading manure and crop residues activity. It's not ready yet by any stretch, but it is something that our livestock producers and our crop producers are having to deal with on a regular basis. And so we were hoping to teach them how to better do that trading and make sure that you're getting a good, fair deal. The Soil Health Nexus team that I'm also a part of is utilizing our base scenario to adapt for some different things, to teach about how to develop some soil health practices and what might work on your own farm. So that is another thing that is coming down the pike in the near future. We also have been working with a different group here in Nebraska that is working with high school students and high school teachers to teach some of these systems related or systems approaches to crop management. And so I have created activities based on this exercise for reading manure analysis, calculating nitrogen availability, and actually choosing a manure application rate. And those are targeted at high school students. So it can be very adaptable to a lot of different audiences. I've also used it with women in ag who are just learning about some of the things that other people on their operations have always done before. And I don't know what's next. I did do a train the trainer out in New York when I was out to visit Kirsten and Jason for the Manure Expo, and I will be doing another one at Waste to Worth. So I'd encourage you again, another plug for Waste to Worth, to come out to that and check it out. And I will be doing that. And I would love to learn what other ideas you have from other states, how we can build this, whether we should add other crops, what other things could grow, this could grow into. So to get into the nitty gritty of it, so you see this map on the table. That is essentially what we spend our whole day around. And it's a 5 mile by 5 mile square area. And we lay out, we have up to 7 different field scenarios that they can look at. You can kind of see them placed on the map. Here's one, here's one, here's one. And the very beginning of it, I have the producers walk in and they lay out their own neighborhood. So the fields are placed there. Their livestock operation is placed there. But they get to say, this was in Western Nebraska. There's not tons of houses, but there is a little town here that they have developed forcefully. I might add that I make them have to put a town on there. But then because one of the things that we talk about is neighbors and how we can improve our neighbor relations. So we spend all of our time around this map, but they get one particular field that they get a lot more information about. And so it allows us to really choose the scenario that works for them and really adapt it across the state, even though the western part of Nebraska doesn't have the population that we do in the eastern part of the state. It can still be very relevant to them. It allows for that adaptation. And we do have, I'm actually going to go into that next. So we do have different scenarios. So like I said, there is up to 7 fields, but there is also 7 livestock operations. So currently we have a beef confinement, a beef feedlot. We have swine confinement, turkeys, broiler chickens, layer chickens, and freestall dairy. So if your group is primarily hog producers, you can pick the swine confinement and do everything related to liquid manure as compared to being set up for a beef feedlot that's going to be almost 100% solids. So it's easy when you walk into the room. If I have a split group, I can set up 2 separate tables and say the pigs people here go over here and the beef people go over here because it's going to be the most relevant to you. And we can really set it up to make sure that they can use the information that they're gaining out of this program. And I want to point out here, this is not what the original card looked like. When we first designed this, we call this our record keeping sheet. This is what they fill out throughout the day to keep track of the things that they have learned. And each one of these lines corresponds to a different activity that they actually get to do and learn how to get those numbers. When we first designed this was already filled out and they got all of that information. Again, we added those manure basics and that's how they get this all filled out. But at the end of the game, if you can call it a game, they have to figure out, okay, so which field is the highest priority? Which one is maybe the field that we should avoid? And sometimes we have to apply on the fields that we really should avoid, but what things can we do to make sure that it's okay that we do apply there? So with some of the activities, we have 4 different kind of styles of activities, I would say. The water quality one, and I'm going to show the worksheets next. The water quality one is kind of a checklist style worksheet. Manure impacts on soil health is like comparison to normal. So if you think about weather, we know what normal is, but is it ever really normal? Absolutely not. So we look at what it actually is and how that compares to those kind of normals. Agronomy, the agronomic value is very much a math. And to be totally honest, most of these worksheets are math, but they're very simplified math and we walk them through each step. Most people, when I tell them that there's math, they get a little bit upset about it, but they realize they actually can work through it and it's really no problem. And then we have the manure logistics, which is for me the most fun one to take pictures of, and it's probably the one I have the most pictures of because it's the one that actually gets them up and moving and they actually get to spend a little time figuring out, okay, if I have my livestock operation over here and my field is 10 miles the other direction because of all of the turns and things that we have to do, how am I going to get there? And then once I get to that field, where's the best place to put that manure and those kinds of things. And we actually get to talk about that manure transport system and how we figure out that out. The bottom of this is the list of the other activities that we currently use for our annual training. So this is what the worksheets look like. The water quality one, like I said, is more of a checklist style, but they look at the different characteristics of their particular field and decide, are they a higher risk characteristic or are they a lower risk characteristic? And then at the bottom of it, they figure out, can you make a change that will lower that risk? And we send them back and have them circle the things that they can improve to reduce that risk of water quality contamination. With the soil health one, like I said, we're looking at normals. We give them normals for their different soil types, which is also given to them on the field. And then what their soil test shows for those particular soil health characteristics. And then they can compare, where does my field rank compared to what is normal? And we know that normal, again, nothing is normal. So from there, you might have a soil that has very, very poor organic matter. And so you have a 1 on a clay soil, which would be absolutely awful. And it's outside of that normal range, but it's okay because what they do is they just put a line on this axis where their soil ranks compared to those normals. And then, of course, the math, we walk them through step by step by step, each including how to do an average, because a lot of people, they may or may not realize that they're doing an average for some of the things. For water quality, or sorry, for agronomic value, we have them look at their soil test and say, am I below that critical threshold and do I actually need that nutrient? Because if I don't need that nutrient, then really is it worth anything to me? And we have that nice discussion about that. So the thing that we initially thought was going to not go over incredibly well and has turned out to be super successful is the emoji cards. And we have truly, here in Nebraska, have truly embraced the use of the poop emoji as a marketing campaign for our manure team. In fact, I have squishy ones, which I can't reach at the moment, that have our UNL website, manure website on them. We call them our business cards and we hand them out on a regular basis. And that's just how we've really embraced that. But these emoji cards, when we first started talking about this, we're like, people are not going to think this is cute. They're not going to think it's funny. They're just going to be appalled by it. And they don't. They kind of giggle at the first time, but they understand. If you give them a green happy face poop emoji, we're going to get some manure benefit out of that field. If we get a red poop emoji, we know that there might be a concern. There's something wrong with that field that we maybe shouldn't be applying manure, or we have some things that we need to deal with before we apply manure. Or maybe it's not cost prohibitive, or it's cost prohibitive to apply that manure. And so as we go through activities, they collect these emoji cards to remember visually the different activities that they have worked through. So we start out with agronomic value. Is there a potential for that manure to be valuable? And if they get those cards, then they collect them, they set them on their field, and they collect them as we go through the various different activities. And at the end, then they can see, do I have more green cards than red cards? Because if I do, then I'm going to get more manure benefit out of it than maybe this field over here that has more red cards than green ones. And so it makes it very visual, and it's very easy to remember then and think back, okay, yeah, I did learn that towards the end of the program. A little bit of lessons learned here from the teacher. If you're going to expect people to sit around a field or sit around a table and work together as a team to make these decisions on which field is going to be the best field, people need to know each other. Sometimes there's not time to spend the day going around. If you've got 30 people in the room, it takes a long time to go around the room and have everybody introduce each other. But name tags totally help, because then at least they can call each other by name and they're not, hey, you over there across the table. We've also learned that some people really don't like our laminated sheets because we do use laminated sheets in order to save the environment. We don't want to have to reprint things over and over and over again. But some people really don't like that because they have eye problems or what, for whatever reason, they have a problem with the glare on that, or they just don't like writing in marker. So we offer an option to have a paper copy there as well. We just don't have to have as many paper copies by having the laminated sheets. Dry erase markers, when you're moving this many papers around, when you do 10 or 15 different activities throughout the day, as you move papers around, they wipe themselves off with dry erase markers. So we still use the old wet erase markers to keep track of things throughout the day. And so it does mean a little bit more cleanup on our end. It takes a little bit longer to wipe things clean, but we have found that like the magic eraser or the equivalent thereof does work fairly well, even on those wet erase markers. And then because you're encouraging conversation, you need to be prepared to manage side conversations because they absolutely happen. People will go off on a tangent, and sometimes they are learning so much from each other that is so important. I had a great producer conversation. They had started working together in the morning. They didn't know each other. By the end of the day, they were sharing that I changed to this waterer because it reduced the amount of manure that I had to deal with, and I could switch to having all spring applications. And those things are great too, but you need to be prepared to manage those because they can get out of control. So, and this is in my handout, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the curricula that I use is available on the website, on our LPE website, because did come out of Waste to Worth after all. But you can also get to it at the QR code, and both of those links go the same place. So just a couple of testimonials and my contact information, and I will leave it at that.